Hey, good afternoon, friends. I'm Erika and welcome to this week's content chat with my friend Dayana, who I have been so blessed to have been working with over the last, is it 2 years now? 3 years? It's been a while. It's been a while. But I first met Dayana through our friend in common, Maureen Jan, and the folks at Neolux Marketing. And over the years, we've collaborated on project work together, and Dayana has helped me a ton with creating visual content that reinforces our brand. And specifically, I had her write this super badass guide to how to use Canva for content marketers. So that way you can have stuff that's on brand, templated, and beautiful every single time. And we had her write that for the blog because it's exactly what we had her do for us as well. And it's something that we all need to know how to do at this day and age, because while it's wonderful if you have the luxury of having an on-staff graphic designer, let's be clear, a lot of us are creating content without that. So we got to be able to find the right tools that normal people can use to still make things visually interesting, which is the whole reason that we have Dayana here today. But before we dive into the questions, because I have so much to talk with Dayana about today, but first I'm going to start by asking you, can you go ahead and tell folks a little bit about who you are, what you're doing now, and how you got to this place where you're giving people all of this kind of fantastic advice and helping them create those kinds of personal and business brands that really reflect who they are so that they feel seen. So take it away, Dayana.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is pretty twisty turny. My educational background is in fashion, and I think that drove a lot of my choices over the years. I mean, I guess obviously, even though I haven't worked in fashion for quite a bit. But yeah, I have been in marketing for the last 7.5 years or so. Typically mostly in B2B SaaS space, but I've worked with several different industries with clients from several different industries, and just have a very non-linear work background. And so that's allowed me to see things in a lot of different ways. And even though I don't work in fashion, what has always stayed with me was that visual element, creating a visual story, because with fashion, there is no writing, right? Unless you're a fashion writer, which I was, of course, at one point. But, it's kind of like I see marketing as sort of more than just the visual senses, of course. But that's really where that sense kind of came up for me. I think also wanting to be a writer in my youth, an author, a storybook writer. I think really like a lot of how I grew up is steeped in what I'm doing right now. And it's really cool to see in a kind of full circle way. But that's really been my approach to all of my jobs is if I'm telling a story, what are the tools that I have? What story do I want to share? And how many different ways can I share that story? And so if it's on a blog, okay, that's where the blog inline images come in and other stuff like that. For me, it's like putting on an outfit. You wouldn't just put on your favorite coat and nothing underneath, right? I mean, you might in some specific cases, but you wouldn't normally. So it's really about giving that full storytelling experience visually, emotionally, content wise, all of that good stuff. And I kind of take that into my approach to everything, to my work with clients, to my work for myself and my company and my brand, and just to storytelling in general, because everyone really picks up and learns in different ways. And I think as a really anxious person, I'm constantly thinking of like, what does this look like from this person's perspective? Okay, let's shift it a little bit from this person. And so, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
You totally did. And it's fascinating because we've talked so many times about all of this stuff before, because we both have had pretty twisty turny paths to being content marketers.
Yes.
But it's fascinating to think about it. For most of us, the way that we dress and curate our closet was our very first personal branding, right?
Yeah.
we decided, you know, maybe we're going to wear band t-shirts, or maybe we're going to wear thrifted clothes that we upcycle. Like all of those little choices that we made about our appearance, for most of us, was our first, you know, start into putting forth that kind of personal brand.
Exactly.
And that to me is such the approachable way of starting to think about this when you're a writer person, because it can seem really scary to be thinking about visual storytelling and adding visual elements into your writing and into the content you're creating when you've grown up thinking, oh, I'm not a creative person in that way. You know, visual content, you need to be an expert and have a bunch of really expensive equipment. But in reality, what I hope that people will take away from this conversation today is that's baloney and those are excuses, and that we all can be much better visual storytellers. And by doing so, with being intentional with our visual storytelling, then we'll have much better results too. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll cover this later, but visual storytelling is not just about the pretty pictures. I will say that. There's a lot of ways to tell a story visually or subtly without leaning on the most amazing artwork.
Exactly. And that's a great place to start. So how would you define visual storytelling from a marketing perspective? What is it and what isn't it?
I would say it is telling a story, engaging in all the senses, telling it from a more, I'd say, dynamic perspective. I kind of like, if this is the story, visual storytelling allows people to kind of look at it from several different angles, as opposed to wall of text, interpret it how you will. And the way we interpret information comes down to so many things, right? Our upbringing, our learning, societal, cultural, all that stuff, right? Whereas with visual storytelling, there's kind of, often you give, intentionally or not, kind of cues into how you'd like this story to be digested. And so if I'm going to use another analogy, I feel like I'll be really analogy heavy here. If storytelling is food, visual storytelling is everything from the plating, the fragrance, the backstory, you know, those recipes where it's like, oh, I first learned about this recipe on my recent trip to blah, 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 blah. That's all part, but it's because they're trying to build a world in your mind and give you all this context and open up the concept before you really dive into the meat of it, right? And whereas I think content marketing can get stuck in just, you have a plate of rice. It's the best rice I could find. I cooked it to the best of my abilities. It's good rice. Enjoy this rice. And you're like, well, I mean, okay. I feel like a little bit, but yeah, like I'm not denying this is good rice. If I had to eat rice every day, I would eat this. But like, I can get a sauce, like nothing, garnish, a meat. And
why this rice? And why this rice today? Come on.
Why this rice? And maybe I know why that rice, but like, with no other context other than here's a plate of rice, I'm left to make my own conclusions. And then maybe I'm like, okay, well, why's it got to be this rice? Why can't it be this rice? And like, you know, and so I think visual storytelling is just really telling the story from all angles and using as many tools as you have as a marketer to share or show a perspective or lead your audience on a journey. And you're kind of, you know, much like a restaurateur, you have to, there's a concept that you're building for that experience, right? So there's more work to it than just providing good content.
100%. So let's dive in a little bit to talk a little bit more about how we can use visual storytelling to create more engaging content marketing outputs. And that snore was Bullet. He is dead asleep. It's nothing personal. Our conversation is scintillating.
Meanwhile, Ruby is staring daggers at me from the couch.
Oh no! I hope that she will make a little appearance at some point.
Yeah. We'll see. She's scaring me right now. But yes, how sorry, what was the question? We got distracted by your dogs.
I know we dogs are a very important part of our content businesses here. They do sometimes try to steal the show.
Yeah.
But that said, in addition to having them become fun little distractions, what are some ways that visual storytelling can help us create more engaging content marketing outputs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, if I really think about it in marketing terms, it's just adding more, maybe touch points isn't the right word, but adding more areas, adding more what's the word I'm trying to say? You're adding nuance. You're adding nuance to your content, right? Whether it's adding a visual element that is going to have an impact, loud colors, or a crazy visual concept, anything like that. It's also helpful in, like I said, as marketers, we're often we're not just telling stories to tell a story. The end goal is to have our audience go through a journey, typically in our jobs today, the buyer's journey. And so adding a visual storytelling element to your content really kind of drives that point home and can often act like the road signs, right, throughout their journey. And so, they're driving along, they don't know where to go, there's a fork in the road, and there's two signs, like those are the CTAs, those are the different avenues for content and resources that we are compiling to make available to these consumers at any point of their journey. And so it's really about, and when we're working with sales teams and trying to reinforce their efforts and help and coming up with these campaigns together, that's often kind of where the marketer is coming from, where they're saying, hey, let's put a pit stop here and have the customer really engage here, and we can, in having them engage, we're learning things about them that we can then use at a future stop. And so again, visual doesn't necessarily have to just be the images you use, but it's how you use them, where you use them, what they're meant to be for. Are they stopgaps? Are they distractions? Are they the garnish that kind of ties everything together? And again, is it static images, video? There's so many mediums to consume from. And I really, especially with Neolux, like I think I really decided to kind of open my mind to just open my mind to the possibilities of what marketing and visual storytelling can be, because often we're so used to working within these tight constraints in-house. And working with Neolux, it was kind of different, where it was like, what's the craziest thing we can do, and let's see how we can execute it. And that would never be that's a thought that can very quickly, if it's innate to you, can very quickly get beaten out of you, like through the corporate world. And so it's really interesting now in this era of my life and work and content, where I'm really just kind of trying to think as much outside the box as possible. And even in ideas and concepts that are already outside of the box, how can you push it further? So you're doing a quiz. How can you make it how can you make it even more exciting, right? How can you make it even more interactive? How can you make it even more animated? And just pushing that envelope, because I think we're in an era where that's really what customers want to see. And that's what I want to see.
And, in the show notes, we'll include a couple of links that I want us to talk about these particular content projects for a minute, because I think that they really kind of illustrate two different ways that you guys used visual storytelling at Neolux to really to drive different kinds of reactions and outcomes. So the first, from the poll and quiz standpoint, you had your whole what astrological sign kind of content marketer are you, or what kind of marketer are you, based upon answering this quiz, and you tied it back into astrology. So share a little bit about that, and how really the visual aspect of it became kind of like a framework for the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it came about, like the idea came about during a brainstorming session, we wanted, we were thinking about what our in-house campaign would be. As I'm sure you know, when you are either an agency owner or work at a small agency or doing your own thing, you sometimes get so bogged down working for other people that you then take a look at your own marketing and you're like, oh crap, I wouldn't even know that I marketed this business. Like, it's not like I'm not putting any effort. So we wanted to be more intentional and have, in-house campaigns go out pretty regularly. And so start brainstorming, not brainwashing. Oh God. And the idea of, marketers having to wear so many hats all the time came up. And that's something that we could all immediately relate to. And in my thinking, I just thought of like all the different, like we started listing all the different types of job, growth marketer, content marketer, revenue marketer, all these different types. And I don't know, somehow astrology, zodiac, Maureen and our resident oracle of Neolux, Jessica Siniris, who's amazing. They were both already like pretty like witchy women, and so I was like, let's lean into that, because the other aspect was we wanted all to have a part to play in it, whether we were marketers or not. We wanted it to be a labor of love from the agency to our audience, which were marketers like us. So we knew it needed to be fun. We knew it needed to resonate. And then the Zodiac idea came up. And then once that came up, then everything kind of fell into place in that it allowed us to, it gave us enough boundaries and enough room to kind of innovate. So, okay, Zodiac, there's only 12, I believe there's only 12 signs. So we have to cap it at that. Okay, good. The wheel, the Zodiac astrological wheel, that means like, what are going to be the astrological signs for each marketer? Okay, well, let's think about what they do and what would be included in that sign. Astrology signs, they like, I'm a Libra and she's usually holding scales. So like, how can we visually show what each marketer does? And then that led us down the path of working with a local artist and seeing what they took away from the concept and what they came back with. And we loved it. And so we're like, okay, so now we're expanding on this aesthetic. Like, this artist is amazing. And so it just kind of all fell into place that way. And then when it came to the different assets of the campaign, so there was the quiz, which Wendy was an amazing help with in terms of like the technical side of like making a quiz on WordPress, of all places. WordPress does not make things always easy. So Wendy Kramer was amazing at that. And then for our email campaigns, for example, I thought it would be really great to have Jessica be the voice of the Oracle, because that is what she does outside of events. She's a tarot reader. And so we had her, we were like, go convene with the universe and come back and tell us what's in store for these marketers this month. And we had like monthly horoscopes. And
I loved my monthly horoscope. It was so much fun to get that email.
Yeah. And it was
who looks forward to a monthly marketing email? Me.
Yeah. It was really fun. It was super fun. And we just, every touch point that we realized we would need content for, it was just fun to be like, okay, well, how can we get silly with this? How can we get crazy with this? How can we lean in more? We really approached it like, this is a bit and we're going to lean into it so hard. And just like, we are the Oracle for the next 6 months. But in the end, like, we learned so much and people really resonated with it, which is what we'd hoped. And the incoming information that we got and the feedback that we got was so good and so juicy that we were able to build that off into another campaign, and then start the whole process again with like, what are we going to do visually? And so our next campaign was all about burnout, because of course, why wouldn't we be burnt out working all of these different jobs, right? And so I really see the Zodiac campaign as being kind of like, hey, we see you, we feel you, you're not alone in this. Like, let's kind of work together on kind of creating guidelines for the type of industry we want to work with and we want to see in the future. But then that brought up, of course, a very important conversation about burnout. And then that campaign was all about, what tools and resources can we share to help and just all become collectively less tired, all collectively chill out, cool down, not be so crispy all the time, and how to collectively, advocate for better conditions, right? For more respect, for more value, because there's so much that goes into marketing that people take for granted.
Agreed. And what I liked is that for the burnout campaign, the visuals became kind of a badge that you could share on LinkedIn of the toast. How dark was your toast? Were you crispy burnt or were you lightly toasted?
Yeah.
And you could share that on LinkedIn and start a conversation with your colleagues and with your peers around where you're at and where they're at. So that way you could kind of, have a fun visual that could, maybe give you a giggle, but also became a nice way to broach a topic that we all really needed to talk about. This was about a year ago. We all needed to talk about how burnt out we all were from all
this. It was coming up organically anyways, like so many, like as we were working on this, even though we were working on it as a continuation of the Zodiac project, outside of us, those conversations were already happening. And so we knew it was timely. And our thinking with the burnt toast idea was like, it's eye-catching. You're on LinkedIn, you see a piece of burnt toast, you're like, what the heck is that? You're going to click through, you're going to wonder, it's going to give you a visual idea or the language you need to express what your state of being is, because that's another thing. Like a lot of people, depending on their past work experiences or culturally or generationally, weren't or may not be always prepared or understand that they're burning out, they're getting close to it. And so I think we saw that in a couple of the interviews that Maureen did with some amazing founders. And it was just like a lot of really good learning and creating kind of a visual shorthand for what we were talking about. And we really, really loved that. And that kind of became kind of how we approached all, campaigns. And I really loved working on those campaigns. I loved working with the team, obviously, but for the first time, it really felt like I was working on a marketing campaign and doing everything the way I would have done it had I been given full, creative freedom. And then that kind of gave us the idea for another campaign, and you'll hear more about that in the future. And content marketing world. But yeah, it's been a really fun time.
I love it. And we will be including the links to those two campaigns we just talked about in the show notes. And they're also posted on LinkedIn for those that are listening via LinkedIn Live right now. So thank you, Alec, for that. So in addition to those two, which are things you worked on, are there some other brands that have some really interesting and engaging visual content marketing and storytelling that you've seen recently and that you've really loved? Because I always love to give as many examples as possible, because marketing to marketers, we have our own style.
Yeah.
But I love to show people that it's not just that it's something that marketers do for each other. It's also really a great way to engage customers, whether they're B2B or B2C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I saw some really great stuff. I don't know how much I'm allowed to share, but as a Content Marketing Institute judge for the Content Marketing Awards, I got to see, all of what people have submitted. So yeah. I saw some like pretty cool stuff there. And I'm excited to see more companies, especially B2B companies, less afraid to have fun. Because for a while it was just kind of a known thing of like, if it's, I don't know, healthcare or finance, it's going to be really boring. It's going to be corporate blue, gray, and white. It's going to be very basic iconography, very basic visuals, all that kind of stuff. So it was fun to see companies kind of push outside that. But in general, I think by virtue of having a background in fashion. And fashion is so cyclical, but it's also like ever evolving. And so you kind of develop a feel for just like keeping your finger on the pulse of like what's new. And I've always been that way in terms of visual things, but not necessarily marketing specific. And so like a really big tip I would give is, step outside your comfort zone and look at other industries, look what other people are doing out, even if you think it's way out of your industry or the type of work you do, or it's not necessarily reflective of the type of client work that you're doing. You never know who's going to have an awesome, off the wall, crazy idea. And so being on social media constantly, following, different media publications, different companies, obviously like I'm seeing stuff every day. I have some sites, like I love Trendland. They kind of just break up trends in art, illustration, home decor, advertising, all that stuff. And so I get a lot of inspiration from that. But really, I think my main inspiration is from my social media feed and seeing what I enjoy as a consumer and seeing how I can rework it in a way that makes sense for my clients. And so just doing different things, whether it's with social media or whether it's with your newsletter or whether it's with your blog, your website blog. I always take note when I see, someone doing something really interesting. And I lock that away, and you'd be surprised. Like you think, oh, there's no need for me to know all these cool what's a who's it's and all of these new trends and stuff. I only work in I don't know, shingles what do they call the roof shingles?
Mm-hmm.
Not the disease, sorry. But I mean, either way, like you might be from either of those, and then you look at, what Refinery 29 is doing, and you're like, yeah, that has nothing to do with me. That's none of my business. But like, hey, if you're trying to spread awareness about something or you have a specific campaign in mind, maybe it does fit. And so I'm learning that, and I'm loving pushing my clients to think that way too. I'm working with, a government client right now. And so they're very used to doing something one way, but they're like, we need you to just be creative and like get us out of this like typical government rut. You know what I mean? And so thinking of cool, wild concepts for social media for a client or an industry that typically would not go there is always really fun, and is always, it's always a great boost of serotonin.
Right now, for me, it's Barbie. I got to tell you, the Barbie movie comes out on July 21st. I do have advance tickets to go see it with a childhood friend that, yes, I played Barbies with.
Amazing.
And her daughter. And yes, I'll be wearing Barbie pink. But like, Barbie has partnered with so many different brands. And it's not that it's toy brands, because it's not toy brands. It's all sorts of interesting brands, including Airbnb. Like the Airbnb content marketing that they've been doing, amazing and so smart and so unexpected. And we're definitely going to include some of those examples in the show notes too, because it's just all about thinking, what could you do that would be unexpected and really show that you get your community? Because Barbie understands that their community are the little girls playing with them today, but also the little girls who grew up playing with their Barbies and giving them haircuts in the Barbie beauty salon and going on road trips in their Barbie motorhome.
Yeah.
So it's really, that's been so inspiring to me.
So fun.
To just,
but see, what you said there, that's the point I wanted to make, is like, the question isn't necessarily what can we do to show them that we get them. The question is, this is our audience. They're loving this. They're older. They're young and old. Like, how can we immerse them in Barbie's world?
Yep.
How can we put our marketing dollars towards immersing them in Barbie's world? And so that's, having the Barbie dream house. That's, partnering with Aldo so you can buy the Barbie shoes.
Yeah.
That's they've partnered with so many random people. Like at this point, we're finding about partnerships by accident.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I loved, is that they've done so much that it's not even like a clear like rollout system. It's just like, hey, you never know who's working with Barbie. Turn around.
That's right. And you don't know who's doing it because it's a paid partnership and who's just like, we love Barbie because
So
it's
much.
just everyone's caught up in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Because like whomst amongst us did not have a this Barbie badge for a couple of weeks? Like literally everyone. And I think we only got that because, from what I saw as someone who's terminally online, people were creating them for themselves. Yeah. And then they came and they were like, all right, we'll give you what you want. So like, even if they hadn't thought of doing, like, I feel like they came back out and were like, oh, that's what you want? Cool. And it's just, it's so good. But we obviously know as marketers, like, they also have the money to back that up. And most of us are probably never going to see.
Most of us won't have Barbie money, but we can still listen to our audience and understand what they want from us. And if they come up with a great idea, say, awesome idea. We are totally running with it, and just embrace it.
Yes.
So I love that. Note that they didn't sue anybody over having that idea.
Yeah, no, exactly. They were like, that's a little crusty. We're going to make you a better version. Like, it was almost like, okay, well, now I'm embarrassed that I made my own, because of course they were going to make one.
So I love that, because it's like, it's like we're all excited now. We're all seeing the potential. But I think still a lot of times, as marketers, if you're not somebody who's accustomed to creating visual content and doing this kind of storytelling, even though you can get excited and hyped up about doing it, it can feel hard to get started. So do you have any kind of frameworks or tips for effective visual storytelling? So like starting points for people to use?
Yeah, I mean, I always do like a research phase, mood boards, coming up with different things that I'm inspired by. And that usually gets the wheels turning. Like, I see one thing and then I start to extrapolate and think, how can I do that for this client in a way that makes sense for them? So stripping away all of the superfluous extra stuff and just focusing on ultimately the client. So yeah, definitely just kind of immersing yourself in that creative sphere. If it doesn't come naturally, like for me, like everyone who follows me on Instagram, for example, they could probably tell you most of the time my Instagram stories are it's just a visual eyeball massage. It's just, these are beautiful, pretty things that I've seen. And it'll be like 100 posts of that. But like, for me, that's me kind of taking it in. And like, but also taking it in. And I feel like it's almost like my responsibility to also like project it back out, like to anyone who might not have seen it otherwise. Right. Because of my twisty background and my weird niche interests, like I might come across something that wouldn't necessarily come across someone else's feed. And so really immersing yourself in it, drawing up mood boards, drawing up inspiration, getting clear about, like I said, like rather than asking the typical questions of like, what do we want to do? What is the outcome? What is the goal? That's also important. And make sure as you're going along that everything is tying back to that, for sure. But also not being afraid to ask more audacious questions, like how can we, transport the audience here? How can we immerse them in this experience? How can we, and like, ask the crazy question first, like, how can we get customers in space? And then, take a step back and be like, okay, obviously not real space. We're not NASA, but how can we give them that sort of idea? Like, so this is me spitballing in real time right now. No one steal this idea, trademark. But like, okay, well, hey, I remember I saw, and it came back after the whole Ocean Gate thing, but I remember seeing a website where you can scroll, like you're scrolling through the deep blue sea, and it's showing you, like, you just keep scrolling basically. And it's meant to show you not only how much you have to scroll, like if you're scrolling this much, imagine what it's like going in person, but then at certain touch points, it'll be like, this is the furthest a human can go before this happens. This is the furthest a vessel can go. This is where this type of sea creature was discovered. This is where some of like lost sunken things from before are, and like that was like really immersive and really made you feel like you were like, deep sea diving. And so my initial thought would be, okay, how can we do that but for space? And then that then starts bringing up technical questions like, okay, what is where's our site hosted on? Like, can we do this on WordPress? Do we have to get someone? Do we have to get an app? What do we have to do? And then once we have the logistics and we're like, we can do this. Okay, visually, like, let's jump to the fun stuff now. How do we want this to look? Who do we want to work with? Is it an artist? Can we do this ourselves? All that stuff. So it's really like starting from how do we bring our customers to space? And it turns into, we will make an immersive, scrolly landing page website, and maybe at the very end, like if they got that far, if they were really that curious and they scrolled that far, they get something out of it. We get something out of it. Maybe it's a lead, contact form, whatever it is. But that's kind of how it comes up in my brain and how I kind of structure it.
I love that. Do you have any specific tools that you normally use for doing that kind of mind mapping and for your mood boards, or what are some of your recommendations for that?
Yeah, I feel like I have things that work for me, but they're not structured at all. So, but I would say, like we are like at Neolux, we were big fans of Jamboards. So as much as you can,
part of Google Drive.
Yeah, it's part of the Google Suites. And so definitely getting your ideas and getting all of that out on paper, whether it's a document, a white paper, whatever it is, getting all of that out there, and being sure to ask all the questions. I'm usually the person in the team that I will ask the questions that either people don't think of or they don't want to think of. And ask it now and figure it out now, and then we don't have to come up against it later, right? And that's why it's helpful to have everything kind of out of your brain, because then you can really pinpoint the sticking points or the questions like, oh, this is really cool, but I actually don't know how I would do this, so let me go back to that. And so I definitely do that. When it comes to if I need to like visually put something together, one thing I really love to do is like literally I'll just go on Canva and like look up different templates that are related to what I'm thinking in my mind, and then just kind of compiling them all up in a document and like start Frankensteining things because I just need to see it outside of my own head. So that's a way people can do it. It doesn't have to be Canva, but just, collaging or mood boarding, like I said, like all that stuff. But there definitely is a healthy dose of like the visual artist take, and then the like project management marketing take. Like, don't ever get lost in either one. I mean, give yourself permission to, I'm just going to do the art stuff for today for sure. But by the time your campaign launches, you will have wanted to have thought of all of that, obviously.
Totally.
Yeah.
So of course, marketers have lots of good ideas on their team. But when it comes to, storytelling overall, lots of the things that have become lots of the really compelling things that engage your customers or engage the members of your community can come from anywhere in the organization. And they frequently start with like an anecdote or with somebody who's not in marketing having a great idea. So how do you uncover some of those stories so that way then you can, have that never-ending well of ideas, so that it's not just marketing having to have a brainstorming session over margaritas in order to come up with the great storytelling ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I will say working with a small group like Neolux, like at one point we were like 4 people, like working in a small group helps, because just by virtue of being so small, almost everyone is always in every meeting. But we did, like when we were brainstorming Zodiac, for example, because it was an internal marketing campaign, we wanted to include everyone and get ideas from everyone. Like, it was just easier to just be like, hey, everyone, if you ever have an idea, just drop it here, like, and we can talk about it. In my past working in-house, I haven't personally found a way, like, even though I had ideas and I put forth ideas, I haven't personally found a way that companies did it right that didn't end up in some sort of disconnect, right? I can certainly speak to how not to do it. But I don't know that I've found the secret sauce to how to do it. But yeah, like there's been companies where sales and marketing has regular meetings for exactly that, so they can talk about different ways to help with the customer journey and all that stuff. But then that brings up the question, what about everyone else in the organization? And then it's like, okay, so then maybe we have some sort of repository for ideas. But most companies, they either like aren't going to invest in something like that, or they're either, whether it's an investment in the tool or the platform or an investment in the time, it can be very hard. Like I've struggled in several different organizations just to have a repository for, customer feedback, client testimonials, like just to, get those ideas going. So it's kind of like, it's difficult because it's kind of like asking everyone in the company to at all times have an idea book. But also like, we all have to be aware that everyone has an idea book and take it into consideration. And then when do you ask to see everyone's idea book? And when you do get all these ideas, how do you set the boundary then of like, hey, just because you shared this idea doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen or it's going to exactly like what you're thinking. Like there's just never been the right amount of people or processes or whatnot to like make that work in my experience in-house marketing roles. So it was definitely a breath of fresh air to be able to do it. But I knew it was only because we were a smaller independent company. We didn't have to, put ideas up the chain to an all-seeing, all-knowing CEO, and like, right, Maureen's right there with us, right? So that's definitely tough, but it's definitely a good point. And I would definitely push all marketing teams to, if nothing else, at least incorporate sales into the ideation process, because trust me, it gets really annoying when they don't understand or don't believe that you have their success, that you're not thinking of their success when that's like the whole function of marketing. Just because, but it's really what they're saying is we don't feel heard. We don't feel that this is collaborative. We feel like the workhorses and you guys get off to do all your creative stuff. And it's like, that's not the case. We're trying to grease your wheels here. Like if you have ideas, which we're open to because you're frontline, let us know. But yeah.
Having worked in some huge organizations and with pretty big content teams, I'll give 3 ways that I've actually done it. Nice. The easiest one is every editorial calendar that I do for every single client has an ideas tab, and every idea that comes up in any meeting is put in there. And everyone, anyone who can view the sheet has the ability to comment, and they're invited to comment with any content ideas. So that's the easiest, cheapest.
Yeah. How does that play out culturally though within the like have any, now I'm interviewing you. Look, this is my show now. But like I'm just curious, like if that ever created any drama or backlash, or people came back and were like, yeah, you guys, like, you look at our comments but I never see them implemented or anything like that.
There's always that person, and frequently it's because they have an idea that's too basic, too overdone. Like frequently their idea is so-and-so did this thing, why aren't we doing it? Right. And it's like, well, we're not them and we're not their brand. So yeah, there is always some of that. Yeah. And if you really find that that's something that your organization deals with a lot, then using a tool like Plectica, which is a tool that one of my clients produces, it allows you to do mind mapping, and you can have stuff be anonymous. So that way everyone could put in anonymous ideas and not feel like their idea was being associated with them personally. So then I think they don't take it as personally if their idea then doesn't float to the top of the list. So
exactly. They can't be like, oh, you just have it out for me. And
Exactly. So the second way, when I was at Schwab, we actually had editorial meetings. And those editorial meetings, like the one for the internal communicators, it was folks across the entire organization in every different division. And when I've done that kind of editorial board for smaller organizations, it's been with one representative from each of the client-facing, customer-facing units. So, you'd have somebody from customer success, you'd have somebody from recruiting, you'd have someone from sales and content, marketing, everybody there, and talking about what everyone was doing too, to make sure that the calendars were all coordinated, but also to capture all those great ideas or customer stories in particular. Mm-hmm. So that was something that was really, really nice. But that had to be actually 2 sets of meetings, because you needed to have the quarterly getting everybody aligned meeting, and then you needed to have the monthly people who are actually doing the work, not just the people who came up with the ideas.
Yeah.
So that was important.
Yeah.
And then the one for the most well-formed content team that I managed, we used Kapost for all of our calendaring and for our workflow management. And one of the elements that Kapost has built into it is a suggestion tool. And we made sure to socialize with everybody that we had that suggestion tool. And if there was any kind of content need, to just fill it out. And we would get people throughout the organization, if they cared enough to actually use it, they would. But that's the thing, is people have to be pretty motivated, in my opinion, to seek that out, unless you have like the links to that kind of thing in some sort of a regular report that you send out where you really push on soliciting feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And it really, I feel like it boils down to the individual company's work culture and the people that are there. And it's definitely tough.
Totally. So, you mentioned earlier, you have some examples of bad ideas, of situations where visual storytelling has gone off the rails. So let's talk about that a little bit. When folks are kind of getting their feet wet with visual storytelling, or when they are, just really excited about an idea and launch it, what are some things that can happen, and how can we keep from stepping in it? Because let's be clear, we've all seen terrible, terrible things like having content that's supposed to be about diversity and inclusion, and it's all 50-year-old white guys. And you're like, what part of this was supposed to be about diversity and inclusion? I hate to use that example because it is the staid traditional example, but it's also common.
It still happens. So, I mean, the best way is to have a diverse team, for sure. Because I know if I'm on a team, I will point stuff out. No, ma'am, nothing's getting past me and embarrassing me. Right? And the company I work either with or for. So definitely diversify your teams. And that's a whole other conversation. But I think the 2 main things that I would say is be mindful of know your history and be mindful of where influences come from. So something that's happened a lot in recent years is this conversation around digital blackface, and this conversation around what is Gen Z speak, what is TikTok lingo, what is AAVE. And I'm just going to say right here, most of the slang, most of it, like a bit, like 99%, honestly, like of slang that you and I are aware of and that comes up in our daily lives originates from Black queer folks. And so that kind of, you have to take that into consideration with your ad copy, for example, and even like, if you're doing cheeky things like using GIFs in your emails and stuff like that. One thing that people have called out as a form of digital blackface is when you aren't necessarily Black yourself, but all of your reaction memes or GIFs and things like that, they're always of like a Black woman. And that's just kind of adding on to that sassy Black lady kind of stereotype, right? So it's being mindful, like culturally mindful of things like that, culturally mindful and open, and not, because like a lot of people disagree with the fact that I just said of like where most like slang comes from. But it's just the truth. Stay mad, sorry. But like, and so just like really get educated. Don't do anything too fast without showing it to multiple people and not people that look and act exactly like you. Have fresh, different perspectives looking at it at all times. And don't just assume it's all like fine and dandy because it's topical and it's trendy and all that stuff, because it could come out and just be poor taste, right? So that's a big one. I think my two other one is an example that I saw play out on Twitter, which is that as much as I adore and love and stan Canva, like it's starting to seem like we do have to be careful about some of the assets that we use, and just looking at that little information box on where that asset comes from, because there was a case where someone used a logo that they just got like pulled from Canva, and it was actually someone else's artwork. That because you know how you can upload stuff, and I guess when you upload stuff on Canva, it's automatically like it's available, and if you're a pro member you pay for that, but you also have to like double click and make sure you have all the rights to that image. So just do a bit of research there in terms of intellectual property, and just for the sake of standing out and not being the same. I hear a lot of people lament about Canva aesthetics, which kind of hurts me because I feel like I work very hard to churn out things from Canva that you wouldn't necessarily think are from Canva. But yeah, so there's that. And then the other one is, oh my God, it was just there. And it's a big example. And it was like, I think in the news, oh my God. Sorry, I saw the time and then it like freaked me out and then my mind went blank.
We're great on time. We're totally good on time.
Yeah.
No stress.
The Canva thing. And I literally was just reading about this. What can go wrong? Oh, AI, using AI. In this specific case, I'm not going to get into all my thoughts about AI, but BuzzFeed recently did, and speaking about Barbie, BuzzFeed did a Barbies from around the world article, but they used AI for the images, and so many of the images were culturally insensitive, just wrong, just factually incorrect. The Sudanese model had a beautiful dress and a machine gun. The Ukrainian model had Russian architecture in the background. The Singapore model was standing in what was very obviously like a Chinatown. It was ridiculous. And it was like, okay, well, first of all, I mean, did no one look at anything before they hit submit? Like aside from using AI,
they fired all of their writers and they replaced their writers with AI for news.
You are right. And I do know that. You're right. Well, that's embarrassing.
That's what happens. Cautionary tale.
Yeah. So definitely be careful for that, trying to be cute and being like, AI will do all of this for me. Like, it definitely double check your work. I feel like with all marketing fails, the resounding thing is double check your work and have other people check your work. And those other people cannot just be clones of you and yes men. Like today's audience is just, they're a lot more perceptive. They're a lot more savvy. They're a lot more vocal. And so yeah, just be culturally sensitive. Can we put out
just try. Even
just try. Just try. Just a little bit, please.
I'm going to share my favorite fail. And that is when you go to somebody's recruitment page, their About Us, their career page, and they're using stock photography on a page that's trying to convince you to come and work at their amazing company. Yes. That tells me that your company is not amazing, that you don't have a great culture, because if any of those things were true, you would actually be able to put up your Instagram photo feed. You'd be able to have people who work for you and love working for you create video content on their phones or on their laptops. literally, if you're putting stock photography on the Why Come Work For Us page, it means that you don't have a unique, wonderful culture. It means that you are so bland. And thank you.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. No,
every
it's
time.
totally fair, because now that I think about it, one of the funnest companies I worked at, like they took pictures of us all the time to be as like a proof point.
Mhm.
And we were always like, we were like, yes, absolutely. They tell us in advance. They like, yeah, it was like a whole big thing. And we understood it was for basically employee marketing.
Yeah.
And that's a whole thing in and of itself that a lot of companies don't really invest in. But that as like, as a person who up until recently, was in the job market, like doing all that stuff, like I look at that stuff, right? And that's my final point with visual storytelling is it all, every individual piece all contributes to the whole. So, be cognitive of the details, like pay attention to the details. And so when I said like visual storytelling isn't always necessarily images, I mean like even in how you format, the font you choose, like that's a visual choice. That's saying something. The way you format and structure your pages, that's saying something. And I know for me as a consumer and also as a marketer, I'm very like, I'm very tough on those things, because
Yeah.
I've definitely come across companies where visually it just didn't click. And I was like, something's off, the vibe's off. I'm
Yeah.
not into it. Right. And it,
In there.
yeah. And it's something as simple as like what you said, stock images in the Work For Us page, or just, terrible copy. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yep.
Why
Or
do you have to,
Comic Sans font.
yeah, which
No. Just no.
yeah, yeah.
We just have a few minutes left, but do you have any resources you would like to shout out that are really good for people who are interested in visual storytelling? Like any places where they can go to learn more or to learn some of the tactics to deploy, anything that you can think of like that?
As usual, whenever I'm asked these questions, I'm completely blank. But um I will say just, any sort of company, marketers you admire, follow your peers, keep an eye on the pulse on that stuff. Keep your eyes and ears open. There's inspiration all around us. Like it sounds like very cheesy Disney princess, but it's true. And that inspiration can come from anywhere, even companies or industries that typically would have nothing to do with you. So like I'm constantly inspired like by, again, like what Refinery 29 does, especially Refinery Unbothered, which is more geared towards Black women and women of color. I'm constantly in awe of what they do. And they're a lifestyle magazine. They're a lifestyle and culture magazine, but what they put out on social media and what they put out in print and content is always just so rich. And it's the full thing. It's not just the content itself. It's the visuals, it's the direction, it's all that stuff. Wealth Simple, for example, it's a financial company, but they have, a magazine, and they tell stories, and it's very kind of like more of a publishing vibe than a finance vibe, which I really love. And then just looking at things like Trendland, as I mentioned, Adweek.
Mhm.
For the longest time, I considered Adweek like, oh, I guess what I do is different, so I don't need to look at Adweek. But then whenever I would go on Adweek, I'd be like, wait, this is awesome. And I think that's just kind of like the conditioning of like marketing versus advertising. Like these are two different worlds. But no, that's Adweek is just sharing all the best marketing campaigns. So looking at stuff like that and being able to think of how can you take something, remix it, make it work for you and your customers. That'll always be a great starting point.
Love that. So now we're just about out of time, but for folks, if they want to hear more from you, learn more about what you do, where should they go next? Where can they find you online?
Yes. I put my Twitter in my name, but my Twitter is very all over the place. It's not necessarily just marketing focused. I'm a Twitter native, so Twitter is just where I go to scream in the void and retweet stuff. But you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, and on Instagram at actually I see you sis. So I'll put that in the chat, or Alican, or but at i.c.u.sis. And yeah, and my website's DayanaCadet.com and icusis.co. And yeah, I'm always down to chat, hang out, mentor, pick my brain, whatever it is, give me a shout. Also, obviously looking for clients for content marketing and everything that comes with that, strategy, and brand identity, brand building, brand guidelines, that kind of thing.
And I can recommend Dayana in all of those elements too. So if anybody wants to learn more, reach out to both of us. Dayana, thank you so much for being our guest today. I had such a good time. And I can't wait for us to have the archive to share with everyone too.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.